quantum reality, and I don't think I'm just playing here with vague homologies, is that reality itself is in itself not fully constituted. What means wave function? It means it's not fully determined in advance. Reality is in itself ontologically open. And now, maybe you know this example, I forgot in what book, Introduction to Philosophy. I found this ingenious parallel where you must know it. This is, if you ask me your favorite philosophical joke, it's not a joke, it's a parallel, it's this one. When a guy tries to explain quantum indeterminacy through video games, you know, he said the creator creates a video game, but he sets rules. For example, you see in the background forest, but there is no program for how each tree looks in the inside, because it's not part of the game that you will go there, you have to remain on the main street or whatever. So it's an incomplete reality. In the background, you have a blurred reality. And his idea is, this where things become charming for me, that what if you assume the same for our reality, that God, if we imagine a creator, was too lazy to create it to the end. He said, we go to the micro level, neutrons and so on, but then people will be too stupid to move beyond, so why should I lose time? Constitute well to the end. So the idea is, I use consciously this obscene expression, that quantum mechanics caught God with his pants down, as it were. You were too lazy here. We went too far. In other words, if you imagine a God who properly creates our reality, quantum physics hints at a level of reality which was, as it were, left behind, left indetermined by God. Because of this, I think that quantum waves and so on are true measure of materialism, in the sense that I use here the term God in a very specific way, not just old uncle sitting up there, but a total rational, intuitive, what you want, view of reality, as if there is some mind in which reality is totally present. No, the lesson of quantum physics is no, there is no higher mind like that. There are only particular standpoints.
When I'm deep in research, reading papers on, say, the philosophy of mind or quantum gravity, it may seem sterile, but I still don't want my ISP logging every single page that I visit. ExpressVPN prevents exactly that. Your internet service provider, your ISP, can see, they can log, and they can, in the US, legally sell a record of everything you do online. ExpressVPN encrypts all your traffic and reroutes it through secure servers so your browsing history stays entirely yours. I travel for interviews and conferences constantly, and connecting to hotel airport Wi-Fi without protection is something I'd often kick myself for afterward. ExpressVPN's encryption makes those public networks safe. It can be used to totally unlock geo-restricted lectures and content by changing online location to any of 105 countries. There's no compromise on speed either. It's consistently among the fastest VPNs out there. The fragility of hunting for workarounds just vanishes. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by clicking the link in the description box below, expressvpn.com/theoriesoferythingyt. That's expressvpn.com/theoriesoferythingyt.
The paradox, why I like this solution of mine, is that I use as an argument for materialism precisely what is usually quoted as an argument for idealism. You see, quantum mechanics teaches us that only our awareness, observation creates reality. Yeah, but something comes before. And that's what, in Lacanian terms, I would have called the real, something outside our reality, but which is there at its presupposition. And now, I return to your beginning. Schelling was here the true genius, because in his Weltalter, Ages of the World, he has a wonderful, it hit me immediately, the beginning, not the intro of the text, where he says, okay, at the beginning was Logos, the word, divine Logos. But what was there before the beginning? You see, that's quantum physics answers that question. What was there before Logos introduced order and so on, you know? I talk too much, I'm sorry. You should be more aggressive. You know, you talk about aggressivity and so on, but I suspect you that you are basically a kind man, you know? Very dangerous.
I'm a huge softie. I'm a huge softie. I want to allow you to explain yourself, and I want to ensure that I'm not mischaracterizing you, so I don't want to stop you prematurely.
But then characterize me in a brutal way.
Okay. Here we go. Yeah. Here's what I see. Here's what I see, a mistake that many who get popular accounts of quantum mechanics do. So, for instance, even when people talk about wave-particle duality, that's introduced in Lecture 1 of a quantum mechanics course by a professor who's almost mystifying it to an audience to get them to like linear algebra. And then all of a sudden it's never brought up again because there's no wave-particle duality as a formal duality. And then if you look at the axioms of quantum mechanics, it doesn't say here's the wave part, here's the particle part, and so on. So anyhow, here's what I see happening. It says, okay, I would more like call it a wave-particle characteristic of a quantum mechanical object. That's the way that I would say it, but it's many more words.
But what is quantum mechanical object? Define it. What other things do we know or presume about it? What other dimension than either particle or wave? Is there anything else?
I don't think there's a simple way to state it other than something that's mathematical. So the concern that I have is that there is some pattern, like let's say, I'll place the link on screen and in the description. Quantum History is a book of yours. Okay. Yeah. And in it, you mentioned how there's necessity, there's contingency.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, let's imagine you take A and then you put comma and then a B and you put the brackets around so that you have the commutator, and you're saying that doesn't equal 0. Okay, but that quantum mechanical statement has specific observable consequences, and it even has an observational bound that's a Heisenberg uncertainty bound. So it seems to me that what you're describing is more of this sort of just saying that there are symbolic acts that matter. You can't undo these symbolic acts, and the order matters. So yes, but that could also be just said of if one wants to make a physics analogy of just ordinary path dependence. So when someone says that this is like quantum mechanical non-commutation, well, is it like quantum mechanical non-commutation, or is it like non-commutation? Or is it just like saying the order matters? Because saying the order matters is something we can say ordinarily, but the ordinary is not something people like, so they dress it up and they decorate it with quantum mechanics.
I will tell you what, it's precisely that quantum reality has a series of properties. It changes notion of space, time, and so on, which do not fit our ordinary reality. And those properties interest me. You know, but I will try to answer another thing. When you mentioned contingency, necessity, and so on. Here, again, I in advance admit my guilt that I'm jumping up and down. Hegel is usually taken as this ultimate idealist. Everything is deduced logically and so on. I don't know a philosopher more open to contingency than Hegel. Why? You know what Hegel says in the famous, you must know this passage, introduction to his, or forward, I think, to his philosophy of right. He says philosophy can only grasp a social order which is already in decay. It can grasp its inner logic. Philosophy always comes too late. And then, you know, he says philosophy paints gray on gray. Gray concepts on gray reality. Reality is decay. Then he is much more materialist here than Marx. Marx still believes in some kind of teleology. After capitalism, socialism, we can get the logic of history where it points and act accordingly. For Hegel, this is prohibited. Hegel says we cannot say anything about future. Future is radically open. So what Hegel knows is this. And here I see a parallel which maybe you will disagree, I give you the right, with quantum mechanics. Not even parallel, because I think Hegel is often confused here, and only quantum mechanics allows us to see what Hegel was aiming. You know, this quantum mechanic rule, Rovelli repeats this all the time, that in a chapter of his last book that didn't yet appear, I just got a chapter, he links a little bit too quickly, I think, Kierkegaard and Bohr. He says that both refer as the ultimate act in a subjective choice. What you will choose, belief, or which dimension you will measure, against Hegel, but Hegel has this point which is also in Kierkegaard, in Rovelli, that history is open, it becomes necessary retroactively. There is necessity, but this necessity itself is contingent, in the sense that once you establish a necessity, once you make a contingent decision, you structure in a new necessary way, you see a new pattern in the entire past. It sounds very speculative, but it's as if, again, you will kill me because this is my quick jumps. You fall in love and then you read all your past life in view of this, as everything was pointing towards this, and so on and so on. So what I find in quantum mechanics, it's not just this particle blah blah duality, but this basic idea, not just everything is contingent, but through this contingency itself, rules arise, laws, whatever you call them, in an ultimately contingent way. You know that in some tendencies, recent readings of quantum physics, you must know this better than me. Are they to be taken seriously or not? You even have now evolutionary quantum mechanics where they claim that what we perceive as natural laws, eternal, know that after the Big Bang, there were more options, and it was like a struggle for survival, and in a contingent way, one version won. I like to save the notion of contingency, of necessity, but something that it's not eternally necessary. Something out of, in a contingent way, something retroactively emerges as necessity.
Is it the case that you started to like quantum mechanics because of Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics? Is physics, and it sounds like Hegelian ontology. So relational properties then maybe get mapped to incomplete reality.
Yeah, but it's not that I want to reduce it to Hegel. I'm well aware of Hegel's limitations and so on and so on. It's just that not only Rovelli, but also others allowed me to read in a radically new light Hegel himself, his work. It's no longer this pan-logical Hegel, he deduced from his mind everything. It's Hegel of radical openness, not Hegel of necessity, but Hegel of how necessities arise in a contingent way. Something contingently erases and establishes itself as a necessity.
So let me ask you this. Is there a reason that there's a particular type of openness? There's a heat equation on a Hamiltonian flow on a projective complex space. Like, why is it structured to not just be this radical openness, but it's of a particular kind?
That's a very good question, but I try not to bluff more than necessary. So my answer to you would have been that you are now entering a domain where are these different kinds of openness and so on, which is not I must admit, my domain. What I'm just saying is that when we talk about openness, I don't mean any kind of domain of pure contingency and so on. It's a determined world, but which arose in a contingent way. For example, today, don't be afraid, I will not go into politics, but almost everybody agrees, that we are approaching some kind of the end of the world, all the threats, and so on and so on. And I think that there is some basic truth in it, that we are approaching a 0 point, and that we cannot think in the old teleological way, either liberal or Marxist or pseudo-Hegelian, where you say, no, at the end there is socialism, or as Fukuyama thought, worldwide liberal democracy or whatever. The way I'm not claiming, I'm not articulating, proposing openness in the sense of you can do whatever you want, everything is open, and so on and so on. No, our openness today coincides with never in our history, I think, were we so close to a global catastrophe. Ecological, artificial intelligence, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying we don't know. I love these questions, but I find all the contradictory answers, again, I will give you a Socratic answer. Does AI, artificial intelligence agents, can they think? If they can, in what sense can they think, and so on? Again, my point would be, what do you mean by thinking? What interests me in artificial intelligence is that it will demand of us to redefine what does being human mean. Because, I have no doubt that artificial intelligence has already, you probably know this better than me, incredible capacities to cheat, to lie, to cover up, and so on and so on. At this level, it's infinitely more intelligent. So, is there anything that makes us uniquely human? But now it's the crucial point. My point is not so, let the digital space do its calculations, but we are still the top of creation. No, I think that we probably, who knows, maybe in the digital space, another type of spirituality which will emerge, which will be totally different, incompatible with our spirituality. We are still too anthropocentric when you say, maybe they already think, and so on. We still propose our measure as the general measure. I'm here more, not a pessimist even, but like something radically new may emerge. This is why, to conclude with, but it's not a joke, it's connected with our topic. Did you see the series Pluribus?
Yes, very much like it.
You know what, for me, the most, not how these hysterical 13, 14 humans arrive, but what you learn from it about this, we, or whatever, the singular humanity subject. You see that they are not happy at all. You know which is for me the most depressive scene? You remember when that Polish nice woman takes the heroine to spend a night where they spend. It's a very miserable, a kind of a gigantic stadium where they just sleep down, there is no sex. Then you learn that they have problems with food, that they themselves are traumatized by the fact that they are programmed to do something and they don't know why. Why do we have to put all energy into spreading around this virus to other civilizations? You know, this enigma of the other, there maybe something authentic will emerge. When you discover what I was talking already of intersubjectivity, not only the other is non-transparent, but you learn that the other is non-transparent to itself. They are perplexed. They claim happy, happy, join us. They are very miserable. They are not really happy.
So what's the point?
So here, you see what's my point. Hegel is just, for me, somebody who has 2-3 premises. One is, when things can go wrong, they will for sure go wrong. Hegel is not, what is Hegel's typical procedure? A big event like French Revolution. Okay, let's take a look at it, and what happens? In a couple of years, you get terror. You want freedom, you get terror. That's why I think Hegel would have loved at least early 20th century. You know, you have October Revolution, big freedom, emancipation. Wait for 10 years, Comrade Stalin is there. You know, this is Hegel. And another thing of Hegel is that big projects always go wrong, and necessarily go wrong, and maybe something good emerges only in the second round after the failure. So it's a totally different Hegel from this official optimist and so on.